Welcome to Spotcast, Season 3, Episode 14, Star Date 9847.82, Tim's Log, Supplemental. This week we're talking about Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 4, Forget Me Not. My name is Tim Mitchell, and I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hello there.
We have Jaime Lopez Jr. also on the line in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
I think the question goes to you, Jaime. I think the how's it going goes for you, our beloved American friend.
Yeah, how's it going?
How's it going there, eh?
It's going in such a way that despite it, as we record this, being November 5th, I don't think I've seen a single remember the 5th of November meme from V for Vendetta at all. Nothing else is available. All of the oxygen taken out of the room as we record here. The presidential election is not yet over, which is very non-typical. Doesn't happen that way very often, and we are 48 hours past the official end of the normal day, and it's still going. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, polling is closed. Yeah,
we think it's very festive of you guys to turn election day into like election week. It's really just continue the excitement.
It's interesting to see how other parts of the world interpret. I must admit I haven't seen any CBC coverage, but I have seen some BBC coverage, and it amuses me.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's impressive from the outside. A little bit unsettling, and frankly, as an external party, a little sad. It's a little sad to watch.
Well, I think I sent this to somebody earlier today when I was talking about this. That what's amazing is like the number of people who came out to vote is like a historically huge number. It's like it even I think it's better than Canada's turnout normally, right, for voting
percentage-wise. Yeah,
and so it's a huge percentage, and yet the vote is still split down the middle, which means that just as many Republicans and Democrats came out of the woodwork to vote this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I guess normally they sit at home and think, oh, it's all in the can, and they don't have to bother voting. And this time they all made sure they came and did their civic duty and place to vote, and yet it still is like right down to the wire, which is just amazing, right?
Yeah, as of our recording, Georgia, the difference in Georgia is like less than 2,000 votes difference, which again just speaks to how razor thin these things can be.
Yeah, just to point out some of the math here. So the popular vote numbers are roughly, let's call them about 70 and 70 million. So that's a total of 140 million. Longtime listeners of this show and the other show will know that there are 330 of those millions in the United States. So you're running about a third or fewer that have actually voted. So funny things can happen at the margins when you have, that. I mean, it sounds like a lot because it's four Canada's, almost five Canada's worth of voting, but it's total. It's still a very small number when you think about the total population of the United States. So get out there and vote, people.
No, it's too late.
I mean, don't say that now. Yeah, no.
I mean, you don't vote for this one. Start getting ready for the midterms coming up in 2022, and start getting ready for the next presidential election in 2024.
Well, and it sounds an awful lot like you're going to have a very important senatorial pair of elections coming up in January, because both Senate seats are going to a runoff, which means the Senate will be decided in January by who wins those elections. So imagine the next few months are going to be very focused on the state of Georgia. There's a difference between potentially the Democrats holding all three areas of the government versus having a combative Senate for the next 4 years is a pretty big difference, or at least 2 years.
We got to fact check that one, because they would only have two, because they do not have the judicial branch.
True.
So you're
yes.
right. They'd have the executive branch, and they would have the legislative branch, which is split in twain between the Senate and the House of Representatives. So
yeah, it's true. I guess you point out a very good note there, that no matter how you slate things, you could also face problems with the judicial branch overturning the decisions made by the legislative branch, especially given the makeup of the Supreme Court now.
Yeah, so my sci-fi brain hurts. So let's talk about some fun stuff.
To put a cap on that, this is why the prequels didn't work that well. It's like politics, as interesting as it is in real life, is not great, storytelling dramatically.
Yeah.
True. Good point. Alrighty, well, let's move on to some fact check. Christopher Heyerdahl is the actor's name who played, what was his name last week on the last episode? Juan or Wan or something? No, you guys don't remember. Anyway, but he's the actor who's the Snidely Whiplash character in Hell on Wheels. He plays
the old guy from last week's episode. Yeah.
Yeah, he plays Colm Meaney, who we all know as, the most important character in Star Trek lore, Chief O'Brien. He plays like the baddie in Hell on Wheels too, Anson Mount's character, which I forgot the name of already. But Christopher Heyerdahl plays the Swede, as they call him in the show, and he's sort of the henchman, sort of money guy for Colm Meaney's character, and he's sort of the bane of a lot of people's existence in that show, and he has a whole sort of arc as well that he goes through. But yeah, he's a pretty interesting actor. I've seen him in a few things, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more. He's like another one of these Norwegian actors who's come over, like the guy from RoboCop and The Killing. The Killing, in fact, the whole entire show, The Killing, came from Norwegian television, right? So
yeah, apparently it was Win last week. I just looked up in my notes.
Win, yes, thank you. Yes, and it was something with a W and a 3-letter word.
And is Joel Kinnaman the guy you were talking about?
Joel Kinnaman, yeah. And actually, I think The Killing, the lead actress who plays the main, he plays the partner, but the lead actress in The Killing is also from over there too, and she's been in a few movies since then as well. Like she's become a sort of a North American actress as well.
You mean Maria Linus?
Yeah, maybe red hair.
Yes.
Yeah, that's her. Yeah.
I think she's American.
Is she? Okay, I thought she came over from. She was in World War Z. She played the wife, right?
Yeah.
I thought she was from over there. But he is definitely Joel Kinnaman.
Her mother is French, but she was born and raised.
If you look up Joel Kinnaman, he was actually in The Killing in the Swedish version.
Oh yeah,
yeah. If you check,
I like Swedish. Some of those Swedish crime dramas are really good.
Yeah, for sure. Different perspective. I think they have a sort of fresh take. I think we get out of that sort of American. Get out of that sort of American writing rut that we get with cops and hospitals and general that kind of drama.
Right? They seem to take a less glamorous approach of those things.
Yeah, one question I have, which will have to remain to be seen, is in the last since March we've seen a lot of protests and things like that, and we've seen a lot of police versus protesters kind of stuff happening, and yet we watch a lot of shows like The Rookie and a few other shows that are like basic cop shows. SWAT is another one that was quite popular last year, and they kind of mention that they're sort of like not all cops are like this kind of thing in their premiere episode or their trailer for this new season. But I'm curious now to see, because The Rookie takes place, it's a bunch of cops in LA, right? Which is one of the hot spots, and with different kinds of behaviors and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes out in the writing and in this next year coming up, right? Or next couple of years, I guess.
Yeah, there was a really good when Black Lives Matter movement and all the protests against the police were really very much stronger earlier this year. The writers of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is a famous cop TV show, but a comedy at that, said they threw out all the scripts for their next season and said they had to start over because they needed to think harder about how they were just portraying these cops. And I think that's really commendable that they were, being a little woke that way and trying to understand the complexities of telling stories about cops nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so moving on, John C. Reilly is a character I couldn't remember the name of, who was the guy from, doing air quotes, the guy from Chicago. You guys both looked at me like there was crickets, because I guess neither one of you watched the movie Chicago. John C. Reilly, he played a number of characters, obviously. He's the guy that was in Moonbase 8 that I was talking about. And when I was trying to, fish for the name of the person, and I mentioned Chicago, you guys were drawing a blank. And I should have mentioned for this show, forgot the audience I was talking to, I should have said Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh, well, then I would have had that, no problem. Yeah. Of course. You could have gotten Step Brothers, I would have got there,
True, or Talladega Nights.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, all right. And Jaime, you got a fact check for us?
Yeah. So I think this was related to us talking about, hey, why does Michael Burnham have such long hair? And I said, well, maybe there's technology that allows this to happen. It's a stylistic choice, not necessarily natural hair. We posited what if Captain Picard in his daily routine wakes up, uses the magic grow hair stuff, and says, nope, I'm going to shave it all off because that's my choice. And I brought up the Play-Doh barbershop stuff, and I actually found the old 1990s commercial, or at least one of them. There is a modern product that does this. It shows you exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't know, those of you transporting home, we've got that YouTube link that shows you you squeeze the Play-Doh out, and it comes out of the character's head, and then you just shave it off and rinse and repeat and do the same thing. And maybe that's what Picard does.
But I don't think you said fuzzy pumper. If you said Play-Doh fuzzy pumper, we would have all known what you meant.
I didn't know what the product was called. I just knew it was like haircut Play-Doh. ago, and Google is very good, and I was able to find what I was looking for.
Well, they used to have that extruder thing. I forget what they called it. That's what it's called when you squish something through a mold. But they used to have that extruder toy that we used to, you'd make like spaghetti and whatever.
Oh, yeah. I think every kid was mandated to have that in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, and that big gat, the fuzzy pumper, which, I still remember the little bald guy with the hair growing out of him and getting really long. And then you could style them. You could be stylistic. But okay, so listen, you brought up old commercials. So I have to throw a friend of the show, Tammy Coron, under the bus because she posted a picture of a Halloween candy which we call in Canada Rockets, right?
Yeah.
And she called them Smarties. Well, she didn't call them Smarties. I just happened to notice that what is basically the role of like, sort of, forget what, sort of candy, like chewable candy, like dry sort of powdery things that you throw in your mouth, and they come in a roll, and we go through them like, tons at the Halloween time. And she posted it online, a picture of it, and saying this is her favorite candy, and they're actually called Smarties on the package in the US. And so we were back and forth with Jaime and myself and Tammy on the Facebook, and I didn't realize until I went back and looked at one of the comments that it actually said Smarties on it. And I pointed out that Smarties in Canada are actually a candy by Roundtree, which very similar to M&Ms. They're like chocolate on the inside, and they have a candy coating with like color on the outside. And of course, in Canada, every kid knows when you eat your Smarties, do you eat the red ones last?
Do you crunch them very slowly, or
you chew them very fast? You eat that candy coated chocolate. But tell me when I ask, when you eat your Smarties, do you eat the red ones last? Anyway, so yeah, which is kind of funny because what happens is I don't know about you, Jonathan, but for me, like, yeah, I literally eat the red ones last. Like,
no, I spitefully eat them first. So
do you?
Oh yeah.
You and your Metallica downloads, I guess. Yeah. All right.
Oh, sure. Now I've got Lars after me. Great. Appreciate that.
Anyway, so that's it for our follow-up this week, or fact check, I should say. See, Jaime, we're doing it. We're all doing it. No, that would be fact check on More Than Just Code too. Anyway, let's move on to the headlines. We have some sad news. Well, by now everybody knows, besides the election, the other sad news is this.
Yeah, so Sir Sean Connery, who is the original James Bond in the films, dies at the age of 90. Apparently he died in his sleep in the Bahamas and had been in some poor health before then.
Yeah, for sure. So now I just have to point out Zardoz, since we're
God bless Zardoz,
a Star Trek or sci-fi. I think the image for this week's episode is going to be Zardoz with the gun there.
That is, I don't know if you've ever seen that, Jaime, but the outfit that they make Sean Connery wear in Zardoz is maybe the most bat crap crazy costume ever designed for a sci-fi film. It is. Yeah. It looks like something out of pornography. Like it's so bizarre.
I've never seen the movie, but I've seen the photo that's got a Borat style.
Oh yeah,
mankini sling is the best way to describe it. With the boots
and his big furry hairy Scottish chest. Oh, it's spectacular.
Yeah. It's an unforgettable image. You cannot unsee it.
Yeah, and this Connery obviously best known as Bond, and that will be his legacy. But he got some real good sci-fi fantasy bona fides. Like he did Highlander, of course. Yeah. Indiana Jones,
Outpost.
Zardoz. I mean, there was, like a pretty good
Time Bandits.
Absolutely.
Agamemnon,
yeah. So I mean, this is somebody who he wasn't exactly a household name as a sci-fi star, but he definitely over the course of a very illustrious career was he was in our world a fair bit, and made a real memorable impact again. Like the second thing I go to after James Bond for him is maybe you don't have to Red October, but he's definitely well known for those appearances in science fiction. It's Henry Jones Sr., right? Like that for me
for sure,
is one of the iconic roles of his career. He was such a memorable performer alongside Harrison Ford in the third Indiana Jones film. It's again it's a hard one, like it's always hard to say goodbye to these icons of our lifetime, but huge life. He retired at a point where he didn't make any performances later in his life where we're like, that's bad, or like he went out when he chose to. He it seems like he always sort of did his thing his way, and he sort of gracefully and quietly faded from the spotlight, lived his last few years in retirement, and passed away quietly. I think this is something to be said for that. It's commendable.
Yeah, interesting. There's a couple of stories I heard this week, but one was from Richard Krause, and that was that when Dr. No was first produced or made into a film, Ian Fleming was still alive and he was still writing the books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was so opposed to Sean Connery playing the character because he just thought he was like a meathead thug kind of, Cockney actor kind of thing, right? Or Scottish, I guess. But he was really opposed to the idea of him. But after seeing him portray James Bond in Dr. No, he went back and rewrote the character with Sean Connery's background.
Nice.
So it's kind of, that's how impressive he was, even after one movie, and then I think he owned that role. I mean, all through, I think in your generation, it was
Roger Moore.
Roger Moore,
Yeah.
and then we went through the dark period, and then we had
wasn't that dark. I can say I didn't mind Timothy
Dalton.
I didn't mind Timothy Dalton's first one. The second one was pretty bad, but then we had Pierce Brosnan. He was a strong
Pierce
Bond.
Brosnan was that coming out of the dark period. That's what I'm saying. And then of course now we have Daniel Craig. But it's an iconic character, but the thing to me is Sean Connery's always owned that character, right? So he's sort of the first Doctor for me, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I do find that Bond is definitely one of those things where it's a product of its era. As you say, one of the first movies I remember seeing in the theater as a little boy was For Your Eyes Only in 1980. I think I was 6. Right. My parents took me to go see that, and it made an impression. This was James Bond. I'd seen my first James Bond movie, and you can say, of course, that those some of those Bond movies, particularly the latter Roger Moore ones, are very campy and very kind of tongue in cheek in a way that the Sean Connery ones
aren't.
A
lot like The Saint, actually. Yeah.
But this guy was the Bond of an entire generation of people, and there are people who have that same affection for the Pierce Brosnan, and I know there are people who have that affection for Daniel Craig. So I think it really does depend how old you are. Jaime, I don't know if you have a different perspective as the young man in our crew.
I do think of Connery as being so iconic for Bond. Certainly in the top 3 discussion, probably regardless of your age. I mean, I think it may be like, oh, you've literally not experienced his films. I think that's different. But now through the magic of streaming services and everything's available no matter what, I think if folks just watched all the Bond films, even if you started with the Daniel Craig and you just sort of went back and went through them all, I think you would find that Connery should be consistently top 3, even if you're like, there's a little cringy, like it was cool in the 60s, but now it's like that's not an okay thing to do, sort of thing. Like I think even with that working against it, I think you would still have to recognize just how powerful a character that was. And the portrayal was. And for Sean Connery, he is so iconic as an actor that one of the more iconic modern Saturday Night Live roles that exists literally doesn't even star him. It is another person pretending to be Sean Connery, causing all sorts of trouble on Jeopardy.
Right?
So that's how iconic it is. Like you don't need the little actor for people to be like, yeah, that's funny, and I want to see it several times.
I think it's one of those things too. Like I think maybe I'm of the right age that when I first got into James Bond, it was on the ABC Monday Night Movie, where they would show the classic Bond movies, but the quality was dreadful. The reproduction, they had cropped them, they were gritty and terrible to look at. So I wasn't really infatuated with them because they just seemed like bad old movies. It wasn't until they made the transfer to Blu-ray in particular. I had all the movies on VHS and they were better, but when they did the full restoration for the Blu-rays, that I got the whole Bond collection and sat down, and they did an incredible job of restoring those films to they literally through the computer frame by frame restorations. And Dr. No was a movie I always thought was really kind of awful, but now I think it's incredible because I've seen it how it was originally filmed, and it looks incredible. So I really do think that there were a lot of factors that sort of skewed me away from that initially, and now I have a huge appreciation, and I love all of those the Sean Connerys in a way that I never did when I was a younger man. Yeah,
there's a ton of movies that I could name for Sean Connery. I mean, he's been in some of my favorite movies, and it's funny though, every time I watch Time Bandits, which is again one of my favorite movies, I'm always surprised myself when I remember that he plays Agamemnon in that movie.
Yep.
But some of my favorite movies movies like The Man Who Would Be King.
The Man Who Would Be
with
King. That's a great one.
With Michael Caine
Yeah.
and all about the Masons, Freemasons, and stuff like that. That's an amazing movie,
Absolutely.
right? So, yeah, for sure. He's and he played Robin Hood at one point, and Robin Hood's always been sort of he's up there with, in my lore, as Superman or Batman, whatever. Robin Hood has always been up there with King Arthur too, right? I don't know if you ever played King Arthur, but
no, but he did play King Richard, right? And he had the cameo at the end of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, where he came in as the king.
Yes, right, yeah, and it's sort of like, yeah, it's kind of like, and when he did a cameo, it was always sort of like, oh my God, it's Sean Connery. Like, you're right, even playing Indiana Jones's father, was sort of they built up towards this reveal in the movie, and it's still an amazing thing. And then it's funny that he's still, even like Indiana Jones is such an iconic, swashbuckling sort of character that we've always sort of, admire him, and he has that sort of human edge to him, but he really gets put in his place by Sean Connery, which is right to the end of where he says "Let it go," kind of thing, right? So it's an amazing character. He'll be missed for sure.
Absolutely.
Yep. Right, let's move on to the next story, Jaime.
Yeah, for those who are interested in watching anime, if you're like me, you've probably watched via Crunchyroll. And I thought this acquisition or reported acquisition was kind of interesting because I'm a little worried. So I think Crunchyroll is a great service. I'm the cheap kind of person. So I watch time delayed, which is about a week behind, for free. You have a membership that you could pay for. It's like $8 a month, and you can watch new shows when they become available simultaneously in Japan. Sony is apparently looking to acquire Crunchyroll from AT&T, who currently owns it. AT&T, who has the touch of death in everything that it acquires, and is also looking to divest itself of the failing DirecTV. I'm a little concerned that it might end up in the wrong hands. It's not to say that it will, but it's noted here that Sony already owns Funimation, and I vaguely remember Funimation having good stuff and then being really hard to see anything at all for free at the very least. So a little concerned about Crunchyroll going that route as well.
I wonder if I wonder if it's tied to the PS5 about to launch too. I wonder if there's a timing thing there where they see an opportunity to use the content there.
Yeah, everybody sort of sees their opportunity to get streaming services aligned into their vertical product stack. So you're right. I hadn't thought about that angle, but it totally makes sense.
How is the PS4 TV sort of idea coming, or PlayStation TV coming? Wasn't there talk about that a while back?
Well, they actually did that several years ago. They did start producing original content and doing that. It was very short-lived. They actually did an adaptation of a comic, which I'm a big fan of, called Powers, about a police force that operates inside the world that has superpowers, and they are just regular cops, but they're solving crimes involving superpowered beings. And it was actually not a bad show. I actually kind of enjoyed it. It had some good performances, but that was sort of their top show, and it lasted 2 seasons and 20 episodes total, and it was gone. That was, I think, just sort of that was in that sort of era where everyone saw a pathway to creating original content and driving people inside their own environments. But I don't think they had the way to sustain it. They just didn't have the content library, and it's not cheap to produce shows. So they didn't go the Netflix route of just going hard after it and figuring out where the money comes from later.
Do you have any idea where the name Crunchyroll comes from?
I believe it is a play on the Crunchyroll for sushi. Sushi roll.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, like I think it's a snow crab, right?
Probably.
Not the snow crab. It's like a crab that's like deep fried and then wrapped in a sushi kind of thing. What would they call it? Dragon roll, maybe? I don't know. No, not dragon roll. Anyway,
there's your fact check for next week.
Spider roll. It's called spider roll. Spider roll. Just remembered. Okay. What's up next?
This is a Netflix series that looks kind of interesting. So I'll read the Ars Technica title here. Action-packed Alice in Borderland trailer boasts a killer tiger and bikini foo. So if that doesn't get your attention, this one could be interesting because it's coming December 10th. And when I look at this, I say, it's as if somebody said, what if you like the either the classic manga or anime, or even I guess there's some movies of Gantz or Gantsu, where people are drawn into a game and the consequences are real and death can and does occur. And you said, hey, people are also fans of Kakegurui, which is a anime show and manga based on people doing gambling, particularly card games. And this seems seems to be based on that sort of idea of like, hey, what if people just suddenly got pulled into this mysterious game where crazy stuff happens, like, riding tigers and having to fight while bikinied, and it's got a little bit of sword art online in it. And I think even if you don't know any of that source material, let's say watch the trailer, because it's like, oh, this seems kind of like a cool concept. And surprisingly, it's not a movie. It is a limited series here, I think, that could let them explore some interesting topics here.
Cool.
Check that one out.
Mm-hmm. All right. And we have some sad news, I think. Sad news?
Well, it's hard to say.
I watched the first season.
Okay, so then you can be our gauge. So the news is that the anthology series Castle Rock, which is based on the Stephen King universe, which is a bit of a stretch, has, I guess you could say it was canceled. They just say it's not getting a third season. So it was an anthology, and it basically tried to sort of build on the idea that Castle Rock, Maine has all these sort of mysteries that are all intertwined with all these classic elements from these Stephen King books and films, which we are also familiar with. And the first season was pretty well heralded. People liked it, it seemed. And it had a pretty fancy cast, right? It had Sissy Spacek and Andre Holland and Bill Skarsgård and Scott Glenn. And so it sort of got off on the right foot. The second season didn't seem to have quite as much juice. But the sentiment of this article that you can find in our show notes and from a few different things that I read online was that it kind of played itself to its inevitable end. There's only so far you could stretch that premise. So maybe it's just an appropriate time for it to end too.
Right.
Did you enjoy the first season you watched, Tim?
I did, and it was, but it was sort of, I think it was partly the star power, like you said. I vaguely remember the character, the Sissy Spacek character, is a bit sort of maybe some dementia or something like that. There's sort of, she has some trouble with memory and stuff like that, and the antics she gets into and that kind of thing. But she's sort of it's sort of dementia, but it's not, like, it's seen by the other characters as dementia, but it's not really, kind of thing. Because there's weird things going on in the city, right, or the town or whatever it is, right. And there's, it's sort of, I don't know, it had sort of a Gotham-y feel. It had a bit of this bit of Fargo, a bit of Black Mirror kind of weirdness to it, and typical Stephen King kind of think people coming out of the sewers and stuff like that. But I don't know. When second season came around, I don't remember if I didn't set the PVR for whatever reason and just didn't catch up with it. I figured I'd watch it later on, right? So, but I don't think for me personally, no compelling reason to go back. But then I'm not a huge, I've seen a lot of Stephen King movies, but I've never sat down and read one of his books, right? So I wasn't a hard pass, but it was just sort of a meh for me, right?
Yeah. Next up, interesting casting news. So the comedian Jim Gaffigan has signed on to join the cast of the DC Comics based property Stargirl, which is a CW show, and he's going to be on season 2 as the character Thunderbolt, which for fans of the Justice Society of America or JSA Comics is a pretty familiar one. He is essentially a genie in a bottle, only in the comic books and on the show he is contained inside of the ink of a pink pen. He is therefore a big pink wish granting imp. So I guess I see it in the same way I saw Robin Williams as the genie in the bottle in Aladdin. He's big and funny and charming, and maybe that's a good fit. I know he has been doing more acting the last few years, and I have enjoyed some of his performances. But yeah, interesting that somebody, this is he's one of the top performing and grossing comedians in the world right now. It's an interesting development for him to take on a role in a show like that.
I haven't seen that show. Have you seen it? Any thoughts on the show?
I have only seen the first episode, and I enjoyed it. It is not airing here in Canada, so I may have watched it on a streaming site online. And so I think it's definitely from what I've seen of their sort of building this sort of Justice League around this one character and then sort of expanding that universe. I'm certainly keen to get active on it it. I wish there was a proper venue for it to be viewed up here, but originally it was an exclusive to the DC Universe app, and then I guess the next day it was airing on CW in the United States. You can get CW here in Canada through watching a subscription. You can get WSBK or like one of the big mega stations in like Boston, Chicago, wherever, LA. But unless you have like the top tier of cable packages, you can't get that. So alas, it is out of reach. There's no Canadian supplier for it. So
cool. All right. So now the big news of the day.
Yeah, the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special has released a trailer. It will be streaming, the special it is, on November 17th, this Life Day. And apparently this takes place after Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker and follows Rey as she prepares for Life Day. And it's looking pretty fun. It's got some timey-wimey stuff going on where she, in very like Daisy Ridley-esque fashion, is like, my master's master, my master's father. You know, it's like, he was like, yeah, that probably would fill in Rey on like a whole bunch of weird stuff that happened that kind of wasn't covered too well, that would be shocking. And we get multiple Han Solos.
Han Solos or Han Solos?
Han Solos? I don't know how to pluralize Han Solo.
I think we have to go with the same way it's attorneys general. I think it's Hans Solo.
It's confusing because it's still Hans or Hans, depending how you like to put that accent on there. And Hans is Solo.
Yeah, this has been on my radar since they first announced it was coming out. It was probably almost 2 months ago that they said they were going to do this, and they just offered a little teaser that this trailer looks hilarious, and I think I'll be watching this more than once.
Yeah, for sure. The trailer or the show?
All of it.
Yeah.
Way in.
I mean, the name Star Wars Holiday Special should like send chills down your spine.
Oh, no. It is one of the most delicious pieces of camp ever put to television. So
right.
I think it'll be interesting to see how many nods there are to it. I think that'll be the real, obviously it's going to be centered around the new characters, and there's going to be the Legoisms and stuff like that, but I am dying to see how they reference that original 1978.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's true. They probably will.
Special, because it's got to. By picking up that name, they have to reference it. So
yeah, sure, with the pancake makeup and everything.
Oh, if only Carrie Fisher was alive to sing again.
All right, what's next?
Well, I've got two intertwined stories to finish us up for the headlines this week. So some bad news for those of us who are living in the Greater Toronto area. Cineplex announced today that they are not going to bother reopening their theaters because the new restrictions here in the province would limit them to a maximum of 50 people inside any venue, not just a theater, but inside the actual venue.
Wow.
So they have said it's just not worth our while to reopen. So we're going to wait until there are clearer paths to do that. So that's disappointing. So, I mean, you could still go out to areas outside of Toronto and Peel and the areas here in the Greater Toronto area. But obviously, they don't recommend that. They want you to sort of stay in your own community and not potentially spread any illness through the coronavirus. So basically, we've been talking for weeks and for quite a while, since summertime, we've been talking about the fact that there isn't a lot of reason to go to the theater because there hasn't been a lot of new content. Well, now even going to the theater is off the table. So unfortunate, but not unexpected, I suppose. And spinning out of that is the news that they announced today the date for the release of Tenet, which was the last big try at putting a movie in the theater during the pandemic and seeing how it did. So the Christopher Nolan movie that was the test balloon for will people go back to the theater, and it did make some money and it did okay, but certainly was a pretty big disappointment. It made $350 million according to Warner Brothers around the world. That's total gross around the entire world. Not nothing, but I think obviously disappointing for what they expected the movie to be. Anyway, it's going to be coming to your 4K Blu-ray, your DVD, digital platforms, and the whole 9 yards on December 15th. And pre-orders are supposed to be up on November 10th. So you'll be able to decide whether or not you want to dive into Tenet now in the comfort of your own homes. I know I'll be adding this to my Christmas list because, I desperately want to see it. I love Chris Nolan's movies, and I'm really, really keen. And I've been curious since I knew that he started working on this to see what this was. But now we have a safe way to do that.
For sure, Yeah. Guess I just queued up Dunkirk to watch it again
That
on the old television.
is an amazing, but again, it's stuff like that. Like, you and I and Xavier went to see Dunkirk in IMAX, and it was a breathtaking movie to be seen on that scale. The sound, the production is so incredible. It does kind of make me sad that Tenet won't be that kind of experience, but I think I still feel comfortable with the decisions I made.
Yeah, we just have to sit real close to the TV and put the subwoofer on and
Can I sit on the subwoofer? Would that help?
make some yeah, maybe, I don't know, make some popcorn and just do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, that's it, folks. We're now at the point of the show where we start talking about Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 4, Forget Me Not. And I believe Jaime is doing the play-by-play this week.
That's right, sir. Or at the very least, I've taken notes, so I'm gonna do the play-by-play.
All right, well, we can help.
Like it's worth it.
I have some questions, but yeah. We can dig in.
I apologize. I take the notes. Nobody else can see this, but this is for you two gentlemen. When I take these notes, I use my iPhone. It likes to do autocorrect. So if there are weird typos, especially for characters' names, that's what it is. And I just fixed one. All right. So we start on the USS Discovery, and we have Dr. Culber's log. So Chief Medical Officer.
Culber's log supplemental.
Yeah. And he's going through sort of the doctor's view of what's been going on with the crew, what's been happening, and he's got this realization that they've basically missed out on all the life events that make them human because they left everything in the past. So they missed birthdays, they missed weddings, they missed, even funerals, which is, sad as they are just a part of life. Like all of that is just long gone and long irrelevant, some 1,000 years in the future. And people deal with it in different ways. And we see like Detmer, who's just like getting swole and, hitting the gym real hard to try to work out some of her problems, both literally and metaphorically. And he's talking about the fact that they've gotten this mantra that when, not if, but when we find the Federation, is a mantra that's helping some people and giving them some hope and something to rally behind, and isn't helping others. Maybe because it brings it to the forefront of like it's not here. We succeeded in that. Life exists in the galaxy, unlike what was going to happen if Control took over. But at what cost, right?
Right. So before you dig in, I have my first question of the show, and it has to do with last week. It was the hair growth, or 2 weeks ago it was the hair growth. Well, this week, during Culber's sort of monologue at the opening, or his log, we see repair bots hovering around the Discovery, repairing the ship from the outside. Now, I don't know about you, but I watched the original series, which Discovery takes place before the original series. Scotty never had no repair bots.
Yeah, I had the exact same. I have written down 5 questions about this episode, and that was right in the middle of them. What's with all the robots? Because they actually appear later on when they go into the hangar bay.
And the medical robots.
Robots. All of a sudden, and they did have that in the intro, right? Since the beginning of this season, they've had the robots in the intro, but all of a sudden, there's a lot more robots, and we'll get to some possible thoughts on that later, I think.
Did they cross over into the Wall-E universe or something?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I mean, I guess it's not explained on camera, but you can sort of rationalize it if you recall that Discovery is not your normal ship. It was a research vessel, more specifically looking at the spore drive, but it was sort of set up as doing all sorts of weird stuff, right? So maybe they say, hey, let's try these robots, and then it's like, oh no, these robots tend to do bad things, let's stop doing it and go back to people. You can retcon some of that.
I don't know.
I think we'll save this one for the end of the episode. Let's get through the description first, because I think there's a clue as to what's happening once we get through the narrative here. So
okay, all right, sure.
So I think Culber here is talking about Adira, the host for the Trill symbiont, that gives them hope that they can find the Federation, given that they have the answer locked away, but at least the answer somewhere for oh my gosh, I forgot. Is it Senator Admiral? What was the call?
Senatol.
Yeah, Admiralty Senatol. Yeah.
Thank you.
Senatol.
Thank you. So we find out that Adira was found about a year ago with no memory of how this squid thing came to be. How did they end up with the symbiont inside them, which is very unusual. Recapping that Adira is human and not Trill, like Jedzia or Ezri Dax that we've seen on Deep Space Nine. And they sort of say, all right, well, the only way to figure out what's going on is to take Adira to Trill, since they're probably pretty well versed in how this will work. of course, there is some consternation, a little bit of concern of like, what if Trill isn't what it was before? You know, 1,000 years later, and the burn has happened. What if crazy things are going on? And it's like, all right, well, we have no choice. Let's use the spore drive. Let's jump over there. And they do. The Discovery arrives at Trill, and they communicate with Commissioner Voss or Vosh. I didn't get from the subtitles. I was just listening to it. So I apologize if I spelled it wrong.
I had written them down. It was Voss, V-O-S.
Yeah. Okay. So Commissioner Voss hasn't seen a Federation ship in many years and is like very, very excited for that to happen. So, you know, having a symbiont return home is a blessing. And we end up in a different scene with Saru checking on Stamets' health, you know, given the importance of the spore drive. Like, all right, you know, you were injured. This is a taxing thing to begin with, and the Discovery is really hyper dependent on the spore drive given the limitations of dilithium in this post-burn world. Right? And this, oh my gosh, so Tilly has an idea on how to use dark matter to pierce the subdomain rather than doing the normal spore stuff. But Stamets is a bit jerky in his response, which I guess contextually he's like, look, this is risky. We can't just wing it with all these people's lives at stake. I mean, look what happened to the Glen, right? People were horribly twisted up in a Cronenberg-esque sort of way. So not really a good start to this episode for the Tilly and Stamets relationship.
But it was a good moment for Saru as the new captain of the ship, where he kind of puts Stamets in his place and says, "Listen, I know that you are the straw that stirs the drink on our spore drive, but look what happened last time. You got hurt and we were in deep doo-doo. So we need to figure something out." And Stamets says, no, I'm the key part. And he's like, listen, enough. Like, you have to fix this. You can't be the only way for us to activate the spore drive, or we're going to die out here sometime.
Yeah, I mean, they should, you know, have doctors with him at all times and guards, and he should be wrapped in bubble wrap to make sure he doesn't like fall and hurt himself, just given his, you know, his criticality towards their systems.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Culber meets with Michael Burnham. Michael is in the middle of reviewing, you know, this like star chart based information about what's known about the burn. And he tells Michael that he thinks that she should be the one to take Adira to the planet's service. That, you know, given what she's gone through, might help, you know, mentor in some ways what Adira is dealing with, some of the difficulties there. And Culber calls Michael a responsibility hoarder. So
I like that term.
Yeah. Which is, I think, fairly true given what we've seen of the character. And
an interesting note in that scene too, where Culber points out for us, the audience, that Burnham has decorated her quarters. She used to maintain a very Spartan quarters, and she's decorated, and her room that she shares with Tilly has got like life to it, which is something that's very un-Burnham like from what they know of her in the past.
True. You're right. I think that will probably play a part and pay off as we go through the episodes in this season.
Mm-hmm. I think it speaks to the development of the character, right? Like she's more comfortable with herself. She's less uptight. And I think it's interesting. It was an interesting move to call it out and really sort of put it out there that she is not the same person. And we knew that, but it's a very, very different way than just having her act differently to actually show her quarters as decorated is an interesting thing.
Yeah, it definitely gives a more home and permanent style feel to it versus like what Michael was doing before is kind of like the real world equivalent would be the person who doesn't customize their desk at all at work, right? Like back when we used to work in offices, and it's like, oh, because that person is ready to leave at any given moment, which kind of makes sense given Michael's history, and especially since she was brought on for what was supposed to be a very temporary assignment, given the shenanigans that Lorca went through to get her on board the Discovery, right?
Yeah, but interesting too, because it really does speak to, you know, we spent the first couple of seasons establishing that, you know, she was pretty broken by some of the issues she had with her parents and being raised by the Vulcans, and the fact that she is now this person who feels like she can make herself at home is a real character growth too. Interesting way to do that.
So we end up with a hallway conversation with Adira wondering why the heck Michael is coming along, and Michael sort of toys around a little bit. He's like, all right, well, guess you can go by yourself if you want. That's cool. And he's like, no, yeah, let's go. Let's go get it done. Right? Let's go down to the planet and see this through. A pretty good character moment. I think some of that comes back later in this episode. But anyways, we do switch over to Dr. Culber, who's giving the crew health review to Saru, and he's like, look, they're medically okay. And Saru's like, but you didn't say healthy. And Culber's like, you're right. The crew is stressed out. Their stress hormones are just off the charts, and they need to feel connected to the universe again. And so they sort of leave that scene. It was like, how are you going to calm the troops, as a good captain sometimes needs to do. So we see the shuttle with Michael Burnham and Indira landing on Trill, and they're greeted by Guardian Z, I think they pronounce that, Guardian Z, and
Z,
XI, yeah,
leader Pav. And racism immediately happens when they realize that the Trill symbiont in front of them is not in a Trill, because they're like, yo, so where's this symbiont at? I don't see anybody with spots on their face. And they're like, okay, so you're the host. All right, very unusual. Can you speak your names? And Adira says, well, I'm Adira, and I guess I know Senatal, right? And immediately one guy's like, we need to force a separation. This is an abomination.
Yeah. Harsh.
Yeah, and Michael's like, what the hell? No, man, like, you can't force something on someone. It's like, oh, yeah, and the host dies in the separation. It's like, no, you're not sacrificing Adira's life for this nutty thing that you're bringing forth. And I apologize, I forget the leader's name, who's leading.
Well, there's Voss. Voss is the one who's being really aggressive, and then there's Pav is the leader, and she is the sort of priest, I think, character, the guardian.
All right, got it. Voss basically makes a hard choice. Is like, you need to get the heck out of here. Your continued existence here, your continued presence here is really harshing our vibe and hurting our ideals, right? It's sort of vaguely religious in the way that they're handling this, right? And it's like, all right, so I guess we're gonna leave, and we're walking back to our shuttle. And Michael's like, yo, we're not walking back in the direction of our shuttle, right? Like, Michael smells the ambush happening here, and they do get ambushed, and Trill folks come up, and they're like, we're gonna take this symbiont out of Adira, and Michael, in a very non-Starfleet way, just pews the heck out of everybody immediately, more like a Giorgio sort of thing of like, yeah, you pull something on me, I'm shooting you first. I'm not even talking through this, right? And she's ready to shoot the Z guy who comes by. He's like, no, like, I want to help. Don't shoot me. Our society is on the verge of collapse, right? We lost so many symbionts during the burn, and now we're separated from them, so they can't make their way, back to Trill for joining ceremonies and etc. So they're, he is the more reasonable of, like, he just really is focused on getting the symbionts, back home and understanding their journey and where they're going next, and less so about the, it is forbidden because this is the way we've always done it sort of thing. Smash cut over to the Discovery, where Saru really isn't getting any helpful answers from his virtual assistant on how to help the crew. He's talking to the computer, and then it sort of goes a little bit Age of Ultron on him, where it becomes more personable and more helpful than it really should be, and hints of artificial intelligence here,
and strangely British.
Strangely British as nature intended, right?
Like, well, something's wrong. It's gone British.
Yeah. So I'll hold off on a comment related to the short treks that folks may or may not have seen, because it will become, I think, a little bit more relevant towards the end of the episode when we get to that point. But hold on to that thought. So back on Trill, Z takes Adira and Michael Burnham to the sacred caves of Makala, which is apparently like the home place where the symbionts come from. It's these weird pools of water where the symbionts sort of swim around and float and be free.
So I have a question. The milky waters. I remember an episode of Deep Space Nine where Jadzia goes there for some reason, kind of like the what's the 7-year thing that Spock goes through?
Pumfar.
Yeah, she has to go back and she floats around in this pool and the symbiont leaves, or maybe that was the episode with Riker. But have we not seen that set or that sort of that exact like the same design before?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Carry on, Jaime.
So Adira says, "Hey, this ancestral cave feels safe. It feels, recognizable." We cut back over to Saru's dinner party, or perhaps Thanksgiving dinner for the senior staff and bridge crew, as he, he's trying to bring everybody together, and he's given the day off to the Discovery crew at large, but wanted to have the more senior officers, bridge crew folks talk about, what's been going on and sort of come together, right? Giorgio immediately has no manners and interrupts his nice little speech there, complaining about the food, as he's wont to do. And Saru's trying to really inspire the troops here, right? And he's remind him look, we all made this choice, and it's almost like a little mini prayer. What is it that you said? And he goes, member by member, and he's like, I said I, right? They all said I, that yes, they'll join this this seemingly doomed mission to sacrifice themselves for the good of the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And notably here, I think we hear from Ariam's former actor Nielsen in that one too. Isn't she one of the ones who says I as well?
Yep.
Sarah Middich with some talking parts. Very exciting.
Well, she's had talking parts in the other episodes, but it's usually like a one-liner. So it's fitting that she just says I in this one.
Yeah, in private notes I had sent to Jonathan and Tim, I said, it's kind of weird that this character has been so in frame in the reaction shots, and it's a little unusual that somebody who no longer can play a character sort of just hangs around, and they fit in this weird realm where I was like, are they there just to meet some contractual obligation to get tax cuts or something from the Canadian government? I was like, I bet you this person's Canadian, and I looked it up, I was like, yeah, Canadian. So highly suspicious.
Oh, you had to look it up. We
know, yeah.
Canada.
I know you guys have the newsletter. I don't have.
No, we're on a mailing list. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't have that, so I had to go look it up.
Since we're pointing out all the Canadians in the show, Karen Robinson plays the leader of the Trill. I've forgotten the name of the character, but yeah, that's Karen Robinson. She was last seen in Schitt's Creek, which is like a major big coup show for the Canadian peoples of Canada. Anyway, which also shows that I'm sure the Trill is actually in Toronto.
Oh yeah,
Planet Trill. I mean,
right.
Carry on, Jaime.
So we go over to back to the caves, and she's got this magic orb that checks the pool chlorine levels for safety, and it was like isoboromine or some other very similar name that I didn't write down, but it was.
I wrote it down as she gets a bath and a bath toy.
Yeah, a little bath bomb to go in there, right? It's just, but it's practically meant to monitor the health of what's going on here. So Adira gets in the Minority Report pool, which is also what came to mind. That you go in there and your eyes sort of they turn white, they get unblunk. And we go back over to the tensions in the dinner party of everything gets crazy tense. There's let's make this statement. It's like, it's a haiku. And Detmer has this ridiculously messed up haiku related to Stamets' blood and not being able to get it off of anything. And Stamets like, dude, that's not cool. Like, what the hell are you doing? Right? Like that was a real problem I went through. And both Detmer and Stamets are fighting about who gets to turn this ship around. Who's like, well, the spore drive is based on me. I take us everywhere that's meaningful. And she's like, I fly the dang ship. I'm the one who got us off the ground, right? I took us through the wormhole.
And I like the line where she says, and I landed this monster, where she actually crash landed it a couple episodes ago, right?
Right.
Clearly that messed her up pretty good.
So everything's all tense there. We go back over to more drama, this time that the Trill leaders have arrived at the caves, and Adira is basically kind of like drowning. Michael's like gonna go to save them. They're like, what the heck are you doing? Don't touch our sacred water. And it's like, no. reluctantly is like, fine, just go save the symbiont at the very least, right? And Adira can't be found. But, all right, well, the only way that Michael can help is if she also participates in this ceremony. So she goes and gets her eyes blunk to find Adira in the Upside Down, which is what it sort of fell, or like Get Out, falling in through the water into some other place.
Yeah, bath time for Burnham.
Yeah, and it's this really weird sort of environment where there's tentacles or nerve endings, possibly, is what I was thinking at the time, of like, what is it that's being seen here? And Adira's been running away from these. She's like, every time I stand still, they keep coming at me. And Michael's like, I think these threads are safe. I think they're trying to connect with you and help you understand what's going on with the symbiont. She convinces Adira to go with it, and Adira connects and sees their time with Gray, who is supposed to be joined with a symbiont. They're on a generation ship trying to find the Federation, and they're a couple, and they're orphans, right? And there's some difficulty here of like, are you going to be the same? And Gray says, I'm totally going to be the same, right? And we see another image of the boyfriend Gray, can now play the cello after joining, and they're like, look, I'm still me, I'm just more me, right? And this was really nice scene where like, why don't you just show me in that box? It's obviously a gift. And Adira in this flashback is like, oh yeah, I made this. And it's like, what? You made it? It's not replicated? Like, yeah, no, I made this thing. Okay, open the box, and it's this special quilt of memories, like the time the replicator broke and it kept making all these apples, or here's this joining moment that they had. So it seems like here in a future where you can grow your hair and cut it every day, and you can replicate copies of anything you want or stitch together anything you want. It seems like there is some value in doing things the hard, old-fashioned way, right? So, kind of neat there. But unfortunately, this very happy scene goes south real fast, and then like a meteor or asteroid or rock in space crashes into the ship, basically right where they were at.
Yeah, it's the car getting T-boned scene in just about every movie that you want to shock you with.
Oh yeah. And Gray Tal has become injured. Tal being the symbionts part of the name, and the little medical drones are like, this person will not survive, but the symbiont survive, and they decide like, well, if Adira becomes the host, this is the only way to keep going. And here's where we see the other former hosts emerge, kind of very similar to I think what Jadzia or Esri went through, where they showed the previous hosts sort of personified and able to talk, including Gray. Gray arrives, right, and they help understand what's going on, have some nice scenes, and accept Adira as being the rightful new host for the Tal symbiont. So Adira and Michael exit the pool, very similar to the early parts of this episode. It's I think is the one who says, can you please speak names? And Adira says, I'm now Adira Tal, and goes through all of the different other names like Senetal and etc. of all the past names. So the Trill seem very happy, right? They're like, all right, I guess this is legit, right? This is something that's sort of like a test, right? For is this a proper joining or not? And the Trill like, well, similar to the way the symbiont was rejoined, perhaps we could rejoin the Federation again someday. So they've done the job here of solving the cultural problems in a very fast fashion. Yeah. At the very least, broke some ground. And we cut over to the Discovery where Tilly tells through like, thanks for trying. We appreciated what you did. I mean, yes, the Thanksgiving dinner went horribly wrong, but I mean, you tried, right? We understood the thought that counts. And Stamets comes back to apologize and talk about the dark matter interface that he had very casually brushed off from Tilly, and even Detmer goes to see Culber about her PTSD of like just admitting is like, look, I'm not okay, right? I have this thing that I'm battling, and we get a shipwide notification to go to a surprise movie night in the shuttle bay. Detmer and Stamets, kind of awkwardly encounter each other, and even they have some recognition of the stress they're going through. And Saru and Culber talk about, they're all just not fine yet, right? It takes time to get through trauma, and this is just the first step. And apparently
I thought that was their parallel talk about the pandemic, to be honest with you.
I completely agree.
It is absurdly well timed given the long timelines that go into producing this sort of show, right?
Well, but they were filming this during the pandemic, and so it does time out logically. This episode felt very pandemic reflective.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible and plausible that they might have tweaked some lines here and there to fit in with the timeliness of what's going on. But probably plot wise is a little harder to do in that case.
No, it's true. But the message of I'm not okay, but I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah, we'll get through.
We'll get through this together. We all need to support one another. We're gonna have blowups, but we're okay. It really resonated in that reality that we're living in right now. It was really hard not to see the echoes.
Right. So Saru, coming back to what we talked about earlier about the AI portion, is like, I think the Sphere data shows this old school movie. I forget if they're watching Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd.
Yeah,
Buster Keaton.
Buster
Okay,
Keaton.
good.
Yeah.
And everybody, they're showing it on the big like hollow projector sort of thing, and everybody's enjoying and laughing, and the Sphere data is interesting. So this might be the part to talk about the short trick really quickly, in that we know that there is a point in time in which the disco has been left just floating on its own in this nebula, and it has become self-aware. And we see, I forget the character's name from the short trek.
That guy, we talked about him a couple of weeks ago.
Right. So other guy gets saved, right? And he has a sort of a AI romance with the ship, and it's very much into these old school movies. Right, it's had all this time to progress and become self-aware.
Crave is
Craft.
No.
Craft. Yes, thank you. Craft.
Aldous Hodge played Craft.
Yeah, so I think we have a hint here that yes, this is indeed the Sphere data. What could have ultimately been acquired and been useful for control to gain sentience and use it for evil might be an interesting.
Well, you talked about the British accent earlier. You were referring to that when the computer system had the glitch and it switches over to the Sphere voice.
Yep. Right. Yeah. And Saru says, it sounds like it is gaining sentience and working inside the computer system. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
Right. So switching over to a scene where Adira is talking to Michael Burnham and talking about how, the former host, Senna, knows how to find the Federation, knows the algorithm to use, and starts playing the cello. And, Michael leaves the room, and we see Grey Tull, who appears and says, you didn't tell Michael about me. And
so she's a Cylon.
Yeah,
it's super weird. This is new for what we've seen out of the Trill. We have seen the former hosts in memories, in seeing inside a person's head or particular ceremonies. Very unusual to just have them there, like they're Casper the Friendly Ghost kind of friend. And we end with Grey telling Adira, "You need to practice your bowing." And end of the episode.
Yep. Now I will. I'm going to throw in one of my first questions just so that we can continue the rest of our conversation, which is Adira is referred to repeatedly in this episode as a she.
Yes, right.
They don't specifically reference a gender preference for Grey, but on Instagram, the actor who plays Grey says they prefer they or he. So onward. Good luck, gentlemen.
Yeah, it gets really challenging. We had talked last time about how the actor who plays Adira is non-binary, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
However,
Blue Del Barrio is her name.
However, the character is repeatedly referred to as she and her, and in this case, Grey, irrespective of what the actor chooses, is referred to as boyfriend and an assigned male. So it's maybe for ease of writing. I view it as more of a gender fluid type of situation. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that on this show, I'm going to endeavor to do my best to not make mistakes in this area. But as mentioned, it is a little complicated depending on who exactly we're talking about. And if there are mistakes that I make, it means I just need to practice harder at getting them, not to make mistakes and being correct.
Well, and I think the first step on the road is to try, right? We'll do our best.
Give me the benefit of the doubt out is what I'm hoping for here. And I'd have to listen to this episode again. I think I nailed it on this one, but I'm not sure.
I think you did better than I think we did last week. Last week we were a little all over the place, but we'll get there. We'll get there. All right. Can I throw some questions?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
All right. So we talked about the robots. The robots. My question was, what's with all the damn robots? That was my written down question, because we do see them multiple times. And even watching the art at in doing the opening credits again, I was once again caught by the robots and thought, it's really interesting that they put that in there. It must have a deeper meaning, because all of the stuff in those has deeper meaning. And so now we're getting this sense that the sphere data has merged with the ship's computer, and we've got the robots. So now all of that stuff seems to point towards a direction of, well, this may not go as well as we hope it will go. Do you guys think that there's a long game of, ship goes crazy, that's why they have to abandon it, that's how we end up in the short tracks?
I mean,
it's a good way to end the show.
It's certainly plausible, and given that folks have talked about this season of the Federation has been fractured, diminished, and the plucky crew has to go and pick up the pieces and rebuild the Federation, is very similar to Gene Roddenberry's idea for Star Trek, but that actually got turned into Andromeda, a show which stars my irrational I was a teenager. When I say teenage love, she was not a teenager. I was a teenager at the time. My irrational teenage love for Lexa Doig. And that character, interestingly enough, was an AI character avatar for the ship. And spoilers for later seasons, they actually build a robot or android body and have a copy or extension of the Rami character in the robot. And it even argues with itself, with the android version arguing with the shipborne version. So I could see them going, to your point, that sort of route.
Yeah. All right. Question number 2. So we see Burnham at her best. She's walking along the path. She leans over to Adira and says, "This is not the way back to the shuttle, by the way. It's about to get real in here." And the two guys show up with spears. Why they use spears and not phasers at 900 years past what we're used to with Disco, we can discuss that. But she pulls out the phaser, pew, pew, pew. She takes out the 3 guys, and the adventure continues. Okay. So then we cut to the scene where they're in the caves, and Adira's in the water, and Burnham and the Guardian are standing there, and then suddenly they get, we have to hurry. He makes a point of saying several times, we got to hurry. And then the rest of the Trill show up, and they've got the swords and the staffs, and they're like, haha, we've got you now. Why doesn't Burnham have a phaser still with her? Like, could you not have just pew-pewed them?
It's interesting, because when she got into the water, she still had her hip, her holster on. Yeah. Right? So I don't know, does she put the phaser down, or does it get in the water with her?
You'd think if she's that aware of her senses of danger the first time, and she knows that they're facing, like, she just stunned them, they're gonna get up, or they're gonna find them lying on the path where they left them.
Yeah.
Why did she? Anyways, I thought that was a strange choice. Like, it's a bit of a plot hole, right?
I feel like that might be in the editing room, cutting room floor, because you're right that all it needed, and I bet you they did have this and then cut it for time. They're like, all right, we don't need this, is something akin to is it the Two Towers in Lord of the Rings, where the remaining parts of the Fellowship goes to see is it King Theoden, and they're like, you can't be bringing your weapons in here, and they don't, except Gandalf, he has his staff, because they're like, you idiots, why did you let the wizard have his staff, right? That's still a weapon. But they were told, like, you can't bring your weapons here, and they're like, all right, I guess we'll leave it. I could see a little scene where the guy's like, look, like, I know I'm a really cool Trill and everything, but it's still kind of sacrilegious to even bring you in here, and I especially can't let you have weapons in here.
Yeah, like, even a throwaway line like that could have moved the plot just to cut the whole right out, but it just seemed a little glaring, especially because they had telegraphed that first one where you're like, yeah, Burnham totally recognized the situation and was ready, and then they undercut it by having them get the drop on it the second time. You're like, but she was so aware the first time, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. All right, and this is the most important question I had written down, and I wrote it down like within a nanosecond of this episode starting, because they did the little recap where they were like, oh, clearly we're going to go to Trill. What are the odds that Emperor Georgiou has eaten a Trill? And I mean the symbiont.
Like 50-50? I mean, it depends how common they are to find, is it a delicacy?
I was totally waiting during that dinner scene for her to be like, back at my castle, we totally would be dining on Trill symbiont burgers right now.
Throw another Trill on the Barbie.
She holds up a piece of shrimp-looking stuff on her fork when Sarah was making his speech about eating food or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like holding it as if it's kelpie.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, we of course we joke about the Sarushi constantly, but that was again immediately where my mind went was there's just no way that this crazy former emperor of the galaxy hasn't been like, guys, I'm feeling peckish, as Jaime just nailed it with throw another trill on the Barbie, you know, like this has got to be a thing.
Trill.
Yeah. So when they're like, we're going to Trill, she's like, damn, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
It was an interesting episode. Very much.
It was long.
It was long, and it was very obviously this one's a lot more emotional. You know, we knew this was going. They've been telegraphing the Detmer PTSD. They've been telegraphing Stamets and his recovering from his injury. Tilly, like they've been obviously laying the foundation of this stuff. This episode was inevitable. You know, we only did really have that one scene of pew pew pew, and other than that, it was really about introspection and emotion and processing information and coming to grips with reality and all these different things. As I say, a lot of it did resonate in that mirror of the pandemic, right? It really did have a sort of how did we get here and now what, you know, kind of feel to it.
Wait, did the writers of Discovery cause the pandemic? Because I mean, last year they wrote this series where we're moving 900 years into the future and the whole world and the whole existence is going to be completely different than anything we've been through before.
Well, you know, if these guys are writing the future, they're pretty good at it. What?
Yeah, but it's interesting because they do always sort of parallel existence the way they do in you know, they had the war, the Gulf War in Enterprise and a few other things that they've done at the same time as they were going on in the real world.
Yeah,
right?
It's always an interesting reflection on where we are as a society. Star Trek, if done at its best, it is an interesting reflection of our times. I do wonder though, and one of the biggest issues, and one of the people who points this out most regularly to me is Xavier, who's a very shrewd watcher of some of these programs. You know, the idea of a lack of consequence, you know, one episode to the next, where do things build? And I think Discovery's been better than a lot of science fiction as far as continuing, you know, growth, personal growth, or trauma, or, you know, like they've been very true to slow and steady. I wonder if next week everything's fine, or I wonder if we're going to see, you know, continued, you know, like, is Detmer just like, I got this now, I can fly, I told somebody I had a problem, so everything's fine. Are Tilly and Stamets going to be thick as thieves? You know, I wonder if this will just all be swept under the rug, because it seems like, again, Tim, I don't know if you saw the preview. I'm sure, Jaime, you did for next week's episode.
No, I didn't see it.
You know, they tease that they're going to finally meet up with the Federation as it currently exists. So we're diving right back into the you know, the thick of things. It doesn't seem like it's as introspective an episode. I wonder if this will continue or if this is just sort of and next, because
Captain Lorca will be in charge.
Yeah, really, like it just interesting that they went, you know, they sort of telegraphed all these moments, so you knew it was all building towards this. I wonder if it has any lingering effects or if it's just like, hey, we solved that problem.
Yeah, it seems kind of quick to be on the 5th episode to getting around to finding Spock, you know, because I mean that's last year was almost like the search for Spock, right, for the first 4 or 5 episodes, right?
Yeah, it is funny because, you know, we talked about that after the first and second episode that you know, Burnham shows up, there's no sign of Discovery, the episode is very focused on her and how she survives, and then the second episode is about, you know, Discovery's arrival, and then it all culminates with the two sides being reunited, and we were like, wow, that was really kind of fast, given that, you know, I mean, seasons are short, but that's still pretty fast to have turned that around. And then episode 3 they go to Earth, and episode 4 they go to Trill. It feels like they're creating a problem and solving a problem in pretty quick order.
Yeah,
that's what made me think about the robot thing, right? Like if this was the first time where we got a tip that something larger. I mean, we've had it that obviously the burn is the big mystery. We've had it that the Federation and where they are and how they currently exist is another thing. So there are all these things, but yeah, we now know we're going to see the Federation next week. Again, it feels like we're sort of, you know, it's a little paint by numbers in that way, not poorly told old by any means, but it feels like there was nothing that happened in this episode that I didn't anticipate. Nothing. Not one thing that happened wasn't how you would write an episode of television.
No big debriefing. Yeah.
It was exactly like, oh, they've been telegraphing that Detmer's got problems. They've been telegraphing that Stamets has got problems. They've been telegraphing that, Adira is going to have problems understanding. Like, all that stuff was going to resolve itself. I'm a little surprised that it all happened all at once, but I'm not surprised that it all happened. So, like I say, the only thing that really intrigued me from this episode, and not that it was a bad episode, the only thing that really sort of stood out to me as part of the larger tapestry of a season was the robots, the sphere data.
I mean, they could have picked those up. I mean, the robots in the medical bay in Adira's world made sense because she's living 1,000 years in the future, and that ship was 1,000 years in the future, right? But the robots repairing Discovery made no sense unless they picked them up from Booker when he left her some spare robots or whatever. But like I'm going to go back to my objection from last week's show with the hair growth and all that kind of stuff is like, and what we know about time travel and wormholes and all that kind of stuff, because it's all totally real, right? But what we know about that stuff is like, why did it have to be a perfect year? Like, why did it have to be a year? Why couldn't it have been 10 years or 15 years? Like why hasn't, like, just think of how, I mean, because her behavior when she takes out those guys with the phaser, and so two things. One is Adira says that wasn't very Federation-like behavior. That to me that would make me, her behavior was plausible based on how she survived the last year. But a person doesn't lose Federation-type principles in a year. They lose it in 5 years of survival, right? Like they would change their natural way of behaving to the point where she could very easily take out a couple of guys in sort of like William Shatner type mode, because he would shoot first, ask questions later too, right? But again, how would Adira know what is Federation-like behavior if the Federation has been gone for umpteen years, right?
Yeah, I assume it'd be like the fable and storybook level at that point, right? The myth and the legend.
Yeah, but then they might as well be Jedis at that point, right? Like, because I think that's kind of the sort of the sense of it is that the Federation, since the burn, has been gone. I mean, like, is the burn supposed to have happened in most of these people's lifetimes? Did Booker survive the burn?
Didn't they say it was 30 years previous?
I thought it happened like 100 years ago.
A while back, right?
Depending on how old some of the characters are compared to what they appear to us be, right? Longevity could be different in the future.
Because the scoundrel from the third episode, says, the one where they're in the honky tonk and with the cowboy doors. He says the best thing that happened to me was the burn. Right. Because now
120 years ago, I just looked it up from the first episode from my notes. 120 years ago is when all the dilithium went boom.
Yeah, so it doesn't make, like, a lot of these plot points don't make sense. I mean, he made it sound like he became this sort of piratey kind of, badass, running roughshod over these poor miners.
Yeah.
Recently, but like within the last 5 or 10 years or whatever, because he built up his little world, right? But
maybe he did. Game. Like, maybe he was just some poor schmuck scraping by, and then he got this opportunity to. And
he's 120 years old.
No, like there was some other mechanism. Maybe it was like a normal carrier one, and this guy finds an opportunity to exploit people, and it can turn south real fast.
Yeah, I know.
And with regards to the Michael losing the Federationists in a year, if we go back to what Quark of Deep Space Nine says, he's like, look, these humans are, they're real good when they're fed and not stressed. They've got a roof over the head. But take away their creature comforts, and they're more vicious than any Klingon you might encounter, right? And they do show a little bit of that in Deep Space Nine. So for me, I think it's certainly plausible that given a year of rough and tumble, Michael would start leaning more towards the Georgiou approach to the world.
Yeah.
Well, and Georgiou makes that allusion in the previous episode, right? That, Burnham's changed and, maybe a little more like her than she'd really be willing to admit.
Right.
Yeah. Again, intriguing start to the season. I feel like there's some interesting character points, maybe not so much larger plot points. I guess we're supposed to buy in that the big mystery is, where's the Federation and sort of buy into that sort of the first half of the season as the sort of big mystery. But I don't know. I haven't really bought into that as a big, dun dun dun. I figure that was inevitable, right? Like this is paint by numbers. It's, we got here, you got here, we'll check out Earth. Oh no, there's no Federation. Okay, now we need to figure out maybe Trill, we can find the answer. Okay, now we found the answer. Now we're going to go find the Federation. Like this is it's paint by numbers storytelling stuff.
And it's going to be disappointing. Like I'm calling it now. Like that. Like if it's kind of like the Alien in the first Alien movie. If you don't see the alien, it has more impact emotionally than actually seeing it, right? And in the director's cut, you get to see that it's a guy in a suit, right? Like the minute I saw that it was a guy in a suit, all of a sudden the alien lost a lot of its power, its gravitas, right? And in the same way that Siru is a guy with 5 fingers. I mean, like I was looking at his hands today, thinking he's got these really long fingers and stuff like that. But wouldn't it be cool if they had done it in such a way that he had 3 fingers instead of 4, right? Like they could have done something like that kind of stretching the thing, like the fact that every alien in Star Trek has 2 eyes, a nose, 2 arms, 2 legs. Saru apparently has a tail, of course, we heard today, but like and then of course they had that episode in TNG where they explained that like some magic bean was sprinkled around all the planets and we all grew up to be human beings or whatever, right? Like the founders, whatever I think it was, the ones who went around and did that.
Oh no, that's founders are from they look like the founders, but there's something else. Yeah,
but it's sort of like, and it's the same sort of alien mythos that's in Ridley Scott's movies these days, where we all come from these architects or whatever they're called. I forget what they're called, but like I mentioned the other day that I rewatched
Alien Resurrection. Yeah, you said
Alien
Covenant. That's right. Yeah,
Covenant. And having seeing it before what we're going through right now, it was kind of like whatever. It makes like it's a thing, right? And then seeing the scene where they land on the planet and the alien spores are airborne and get into the people and start taking them out, that was a little too close to home considering what we're going through right now. And it gave the movie, because I remember watching the movie the first time, and I suppose because you want to sort of get through the story and find out how the Michael and sort of David and what was the other, Walter or whatever the other robot played by Fassbinder is, you want to get through it and sort of see what the plot is, but this one I spent like my attention was more on the original landing on the planet and them getting infected and that kind of stuff, because that was a little too close to home, right? So there's another movie that I watched recently, and I'll add it to my watch list. But it's interesting seeing them from this perspective, right? So, but it's kind of like, it's going to be disappointing when we find out what the deal is with the Federation. It's kind of like, I personally would think, and maybe I'm in the minority here, but I think it would be a better story vehicle if we maybe don't find out what happened to the Federation, or we don't find the Federation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like trying to find the end of The Walking Dead. There is no end to The Walking Dead. That's the whole point.
Yeah, although I think in this one, I think the whole notion will be that Day will be the spark that reignites this, unity across the galaxy and everything else. So they do find a home after abandoning their previous home. I mean, I get the metaphor. It's just, like I say, we'll see.
But by the same token, though, I mean, a lot of, the original series, a lot of new societies that they came across didn't even know who the Federation were, or, there was like the Tower, or the Tower of Babel, or whatever it was called, that episode where they're trying to bring the Tellarites and the Andorians together to join the Federation. I mean, like, and I think in, Deep Space Nine and in Voyager, there were a lot of new worlds, let's call it, that they went to that weren't part of the Federation, right? And, that's sort of, they were building the Federation, is what I'm saying, in those first, series of TV shows. And this one, we've gone past the Federation. Are we going to go back to the Federation? Like in Star Wars, you've got the rise of the Empire, right? And then you've got the fall of the Empire. Now, in the new telling of the Star Trek or Star Wars, we have this new, what do they call it now? The with Admiral Hawks or whatever his name, General Hawks.
Oh yeah, the New Order or whatever. Yeah,
the New Order. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of the next version of First Order. So it's like Federation 2.0. Like, what is that going to look like? And because it can't be having gone through the burn and having gone through the whole of this world, these worlds, not having a Federation. How can you bring the Federation back in its glory, right?
Yeah.
So I
used to joke about the original series being spreading the American way through the universe, right? So that sort of seemed to be the solution to everything, was teach them to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and that would solve all the problems.
Literally, right? Pull out the Constitution of the United States of America, which is hilarious and very on the nose. But Jonathan, you're saying some interesting things about the pace here, and we should try to remember this at the very tail end of this season, because because historically, and history is only 2 seasons thus far, but historically, we 3 hosts have noticed that there's a pattern of like, they've set up a lot and there's only like an episode or 2 episodes left. How are they possibly going to wrap this up? And we always call it the hold my beer. I'm going to wrap up these storylines. Yeah. So I wonder if
the George Lucas checklist is what it is.
Yeah, I wonder if they learned a little bit on that. I was like, all right, well, let's put the hold my beer at the beginning, and then we can control the pace going up to the final episode. Let's see if that ends up turning out to be the case, or if they just threw more in there, and we're still going to be hold my beer for the final episode.
Yeah. I mean, again, and it is one of the challenges too of these more compact British style seasons that we're getting in this world nowadays, where we're getting we're not quite down to the 3 or 4 episode seasons we're getting in England, but we certainly are getting a tighter one. I think 10 episodes for Lower Decks. This one is, I think it's 14. You do have to be more compact in your storytelling, but I think we would all acknowledge, as people who survived the era of let's do 24 episodes because 24 episodes is how many you need to do in a season for no explicable reason. And I saw Kevin Smith talk about this once, where he said the rule of thumb is there's 8 good ones, 8 bad ones, and 8 that are okay. And that's, if you go back and you watch almost any season of almost any show from the 80s and 90s, it's not bad math. There's really only 8 episodes a season of any given program that really matter or that were exceptional. There are 8 where you're like, yeah, it was okay, and then there are 8 where you're like, why did they make this? And it's because of all the contractual obligations of well, we got this many weeks to fill, and that's what the contract calls for. Now we're telling 14 telling the whole thing in 14 episodes. We're cutting out those 10 of Chuffa. Hopefully that means that we're not doing equal 4-4 and 4-4 and 3, or if it's 5-5 and 5 or whatever it is, or 5-5 and 4. Hopefully we're getting a more equitable and logically paced season, and maybe we are.
No clip shows, no visiting the Scottish planet to reconnect with our grandmother's love ghost.
Thank you very much for perfectly illustrating my point. Like, there are so many episodes where you're like, I can't believe they did that, But yeah, I mean, if you went back and and I had this issue with Xavier. Xavier, my son, wanted to catch up on Star Trek. He's started enjoying. He's watched all of Discovery. He's watched all of Lower Decks. He's watched Picard. He's gotten into this new iteration of Star Trek, but he has not watched very much of the pre-new era. And he has this completist sense inside him where he's like, I kind of like to be able to sort of start with the original series, watch every episode of every series as I go through. I said, well, first of all, that's going to take you months and months and months. And second of all, you're going to tune out because some of it's bad. So if you boil it down, I mean, you think about it, realistically, there's probably only maybe 40 episodes of TNG that you really have to watch to get the whole crux of the series. And same thing for DS9, same thing for Voyager, less so for Enterprise because it was a lot more just sort of meandering. And the original series, I know I'm going to take some flack for this, but probably only 10 episodes that you really need to know.
I agree. I mean, I started watching, as I said, I finished watching All Good Things last week. So, of course, this week they're back at the very beginning. And I think my least favorite episode of Star Trek ever is the second episode of the Next Generation.
100% agree with you. That is a terrible episode of television.
Yeah, and I watched it, and it was so bad. And Picard, Patrick Stewart, is so wooden in those first episodes, and Data is such a, I graduated from the Starfleet, so
they did find their legs. There's a even within the first sort of 5 or 6 episodes, there's a couple where you're like, oh, okay. Even the one, and we talked about how trite it is and how often it's replicated, the one where they all get sick and they all want to hump each other on that's still a good episode. Like, it's so trite and it's so obvious, but the performances are good. The character arcs, the relationship between Tasha Yar and Data, like a lot of stuff start to come to the fore, and that episode's actually pretty good, even though you're like, I could give 1,000 monkeys 1,000 typewriters and they'd come up with this in 20 minutes.
Have we had that in Discovery yet? Not yet, right?
No, and I think that's a huge credit to them. They did do it in Lower Decks, but I think it was an homage to how many times it's been done on science fiction / Star Trek. So
yeah, I think for the completionist aspect. It's like, my son, you cannot be a true Star Trek fan unless you have seen Code of Honor and Shades of Grey.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you Sub Rosa whether you want to or not, but those two should be an interesting dinner time discussion at your household. But like, let's talk about what we just saw in these episodes and why they're problematic.
Yeah, although it's funny because I think about like the great episodes, the episodes that really stand out, you know, Darmok and Gelada Tanagra, you know, you think about these great, you know, all the sub references and stuff like that sort of.
There are 4 lights.
Yeah, like there are so many where you want, you know, your son or your friends or, you know, whatever you have the, you know, oh, what'd you think? You want to expose them to these things, but then there's so many where you're like, I feel bad for recommending this, you know, like, ooh. Because again, if you watch Encounter at Farpoint, you're like, okay, well, it's, you know, it serves its purpose. It's a pilot, right? 2 parts. It kind of establishes the Starfleet ethos, and it's critical. You have to know who Q is. You have to know the characters. Okay, fine. But then you can skip easily another 3 or 4 episodes in there. And then in season 1, other than that, as far as required watching, there's like 3 episodes, maybe. Like,
is the one where the tar pit, one of the required ones?
Yeah, I would say it is. I mean, it's not a great episode of television, but it's certainly a milestone in that, you know, they wrote off or killed a character off like that. And she does come back in some critical episodes when she comes back. The time travel episode, was it Broken Arrow? That might be one of the best episodes of the entire run. Or Time Zero, what's it called? Time Zero? The one where they're in the time loop and it keeps going around and then.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's brilliant storytelling.
Yeah, that's probably, I think, that episode where Data starts to realize what they're in the loop. That's, I think, and they keep trying and blowing up. Yeah, where
the pre-credits scene ends with the destruction of the ship, and you're like, what's happening? Like, that's really one of the best examples of how good Trek can be when it's at its best.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like at some point maybe we need to do that as an exercise. We have to say to Xavier, if you want to get into this world, here's the required episodes of each show that you need to get into. It'd be a good discussion to have too, because, you know, opinions may vary as to what's an essential.
Well, friends of the show, Jean McDonald is a friend of ours. She's the one that wrote the Voyager list, right? She does a show called Voyager. I don't know what it's called, but it's a podcast, and she's, I don't know, maybe 2 years into it. And she has another friend or fan, and they're on, and they watch an episode, and then they review it, and it's an interesting take on it, because she handpicks the shows to like, she doesn't go through the whole thing like we're doing now. Like, we're doing this because, you know, these are coming out and we're talking about them as they come, right? But she does them. She handpicks the episodes and then assigns it to the person to watch, and then they talk about why they think this is a great Janeway show or whatever, or how did Neelix act in this one, and so on and so forth, right? And it's an interesting way to approach this, right? But that's, you know, going back and revisiting something that's, you know, been a long time ago. And I think we could do that. We could sort of say, you know, pick an episode and talk about it, or we all do it together, kind of thing, right? So
yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to our watch list, since we're getting on in time here. What do you got for us, Jaime?
So the fine engineers over at Disney have apparently decided that Westworld and Five Nights at Freddy were really good models for what they're looking to do. So this will not play very well in an audio-only medium. So I do recommend folks go to the show notes. I will read the title and see if that explains. Disney's new skinless robot can blink like a human because why not? And you watch the video, it's actually pretty impressive and horrifyingly creepy. I don't know why they didn't put, you know, some sort of covering on this, because it's cool tech. It's interesting the way its eyes move. They call it saccades. Think the rapid eye movements. It looks like it's moving up and down to mimic breathing. I'm sure this will make much better, cooler stuff at the parks. But boy almighty, I couldn't stop thinking about Westworld and Five Nights at Freddy's and being killed in some horrible way.
Right, cool.
Second one I have here is Voyager's triumphant return to fluidic space, where apparently physicists in a university in the Netherlands have 3D printed a miniature version of the Voyager at a 15 micron size, and it moves because the coating that it has on it and the solution that they put it in interact in such a way that this just moves based on chemical reaction. So apparently this is something that is being being done not just for fun, but to prove out like what they can do at very, very small scales with 3D printing. So, Tim, I know you've had some funs with 3D printers. Could you imagine yours printing at 15 microns in size and making a Voyager or what looks like the Steamboat Willie steamboat? Not really sure.
Well, the little steamboat thing there is it's a test print model that that they use to measure to qualify printers, right? Like you print this, I forget what they call it, like, but it has a name, and I'll find it out for next week. But any magazine or whatever, anybody who's testing a printer will print this particular model. I've never actually printed it myself, but this is one of those. And the other one, the spiral that you see there, like there's a spiral. Printing spirals is apparently a good way to test a printer. But yeah, that's what the whole steamboat thingy is. It's a commonly used model, benchy, 3D benchy they call it, which is a tugboat. Yeah, they're in the article. But that's what they call it. It's the benchmark printable thing, right?
Yeah, it makes sense that you would have some benchmark thing that you run everything through to see like how does this compare?
Yeah.
What are the defects? That sort of thing.
Yeah, because I mean, there's an arch in it, and printing arches can be problematic for some printers. Like, because if you're printing something that's not supported underneath, it can sometimes cause problems for printers. So that's a good test of that. But I think the detail and comparing the detail, and so as soon as I scrolled down to the pictures of the other objects they printed, and of course the 3D benchy there is typical. But definitely, like I knew immediately it was a 3D printed job as soon as I saw that little guy. Yeah, alrighty, Jonathan, you wrote SNL.
SNL, yeah, I've been enjoying this season of SNL, but I wanted to just flag that this week's episode is sure to be a classic. So SNL this week is going to be hosted by Dave Chappelle, who is one of my very favorite comedians. I've had a chance to see him live a couple of times, and I'm a humongous fan. And the musical guest are the Foo Fighters. And I put it on here because he very famously hosted the episode in 2016. Last time he hosted, and I believe the first time he hosted, was 2016 when it was the several days after the U.S. election. There was a lot of surprise as to what had happened in 2016, and he did a very good job of just sort of coming out and saying, yeah, we're all surprised, but like, let's just sort of, see how it goes. And he did a really good job of balancing the humor with the sort of shock and catharsis that I think America needed in that moment. Particularly, the audience of that show, I think, tends to skew more towards the Democrats. And so it was a really good episode. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does this week. And the Foo Fighters are there too. So it's going to be awesome. And the other thing I have on here, I don't know if you guys have clicked on this link, but if you haven't, please do so now because it is brilliant.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. As soon as I saw the first sort of gallery image and then clicked through, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. By the way, Tim, if you're looking for Christmas ideas, this is the top of the list. So the Star Wars figures that have been put out over the last number of years, there are a variety of different lines. There is the Black Series, which are these very high-end, very articulated and very detailed figures that you can get from Hasbro. There is the Vintage Collection that are the same stature as far as size as the classic line of 3 7/8 or whatever they are action figures to scale, although nowadays they're certainly far nicer, more modern looking sculpts. And then they have this series they call the Retro Collection. And the Retro Collection, what they've been doing up until now is doing these figures that are in the style of the original packages, and they really are kind of replicas of what the original figures look like for those of us who don't necessarily have all the original figures or they want to have them in the packages. They're really nice little keepsakes, but they've decided to up their game recently by putting out a series of action figures done in the classic style. They look very much like they belong in the 1978 through 86 Star Wars action figure line, but based on the characters from The Mandalorian. So if you go to this link and you can have a look, they look amazing. And they are the first 7 figures from this retro line that look like they are taken right out of the 1980s figure line, but they are the characters from The Mandalorian. They've got the vinyl capes. They've got, all the kinds kind of the 0 point that they've got, like arms and legs go up and down, head turns. That is it. They are just like a classic 1980s Star Wars figure. But we've got the Mandalorian, we've got Cara Dune, we've got IG-11, we've got, of course, the Child, or Baby Yoda as he's commonly known. We've got Moff Gideon, we've got Griff Karga, we've got the Ugnaught character that helps out the Mandalorian in a couple episodes, and they're just the best. They're just the best thing I've seen all year. These things are awesome, and I'm so happy that they have decided to just do this. I don't know if this is a one-off or if they're going to keep doing more, or if they're going to do other like, are we going to get a Rey and Finn, or are we in this sort of more retro style? But I am way into this. This is awesome. Jaime, Christmas list?
Yeah, definitely. This is pretty amazing. I mean, just the cape, that Vader weird vinyl style cape, just was amazing.
Yeah, and the little like stand that they have Baby Yoda on with the little, like, it just looks exactly like it came. Like, it's honestly feels like a time warp. It's just so brilliant. I just love that they decided that this was something to do. They're a little more expensive than the standard figures, though. The link that I put into our show notes is for buying the full set of the entire first wave, which is 7 figures, and this is Canadian. This is a Canadian site that I've got a link to, but it's $130 Canadian. So doing the math, that's $100 American. And I think I looked it up individually, and yeah, they're more or less $16-17 a figure. So a pretty far cry from the $3 or $4 they were when they first came out in the 1980s. But still, if you're a fan of the original line of figures and or the Mandalorian, this is a pretty kitschy and cool Christmas idea. And Tim hasn't commented because he's busy ordering them for me for Christmas. Yeah, the site that I linked to here is the reason that I did this one is because there are some really good Big Bad Toy Store. There's some great online toy stores for finding collectibles of this ilk, but this one is called toysnowman.com, and it is a Canadian-based one. So for Canadian listeners, it's always nice because obviously they charge in Canadian dollars, they ship within Canada, and that keeps the costs lower. So
yeah, free shipping it says here. So
yeah, good. If you order, I think it's over $80 or something like that, they give you free shipping and stuff. So
yeah, you never know otherwise. Yeah.
So very cool.
Yeah, so I was telling you earlier that I've watched a couple of movies, and they make it a little bit more sense in light of the current events going on. And so one of the movies I've been wanting to watch for a long time, and it was on because last week was Halloween, so there was a lot of Halloween obviously was on, and Friday the 13th and the Terminator movies were on. So I kind of flipped by those and watched a little bit of those ones. And but the one movie I wanted to see was John Krasinski's directorial piece. I don't know if it was his first one or whatever, but called A Quiet Place, starring his wife Emily Blunt and himself, and these amazing kids who are in the movie too. I always wanted to see the story behind it. Is that again, it's another one of these sort of alien invasions, kind of War of the Worlds kind of thing, where these mysterious, assuming alien creatures take people out, and what they do is they're blind, basically. They're effectively blind, the creatures, but they work on sound. And so the whole thing is this family has survived this apocalyptic, pandemic-y kind of thing, and they're all walking around, not saying a word. The one daughter's deaf, so they all use sign language to talk to each other, including the normally hearing-abled persons. And they pour sand down on the pathways as they go from one place to the other. They don't wear shoes, so they can't make any noise whatsoever, and it's a really creepy movie. And at one point, Emily Blunt's character, she's pregnant and she's due to have her baby, just as one of these aliens is like in the house with her, and she's going through labor and giving birth to this child while literally biting her tongue. And it's like I mean, I've not been there aren't many things. I've been jumped out of my seat in a few movies and stuff stuff like that. But this was a really creepy movie. And again, this perspective of this kind of change in the way the normalcy of things totally reflects what we're going through right now with the pandemic and the lockdowns and the mask wearing and all that kind of stuff, right? So really, really interesting movie to watch at this time in our lives, right? So I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, but and apparently there's a second version as well. Mm-hmm. Have you seen it?
I have not.
I've seen A Quiet Place. I've not seen the sequel prequel.
Right. Was it a prequel?
I think maybe it's a both prequel and sequel. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I've not seen it.
Yeah, and it's really it's an interesting story because I mean there's it's sort of the family dynamic as they go through this trying to survive in this thing, and with a baby, how do you stop a baby from crying, and how do you plan to keep a baby quiet and that kind of stuff. So I mean there's a lot of planning and things that go into this movie.
Wait, I know the answer to that one. It's use a condom.
Use a condom, right?
I guess they would last for a while before they start deteriorating. True.
Anyway, so yeah, it's an interesting dystopian kind of the future is not what we think kind of movie, right? Well, I definitely recommend it. A Quiet Place.
Cool.
And that's it for the week. So hey, Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithAHair.
And Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram as @JPK News.
All right, and as I said last night, live on the air to Xavier, the number one fan. My name is Timitra, TIMMITRA. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. And so next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. This is Jean-Luc Picard. Shut up, Wesley. Sorry, say again. Just the tag. Gotcha. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter @Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
In the spirit of Halloween, last week I watched Zodiac, which I'd never seen before.
Oh yeah, that's a good movie. I like that one.
I really enjoyed that. I don't like... I love David Fincher, but I've been putting off watching that one for years because I don't like scary movies very much.
Really?
Not especially, but it's not like it's funny because it's kind of an unsettling film, but it's funny because it really felt to me, and maybe it resonated with me just differently because it's centered around these people that work at the paper, right? So
yeah, exactly,
for me, I was looking at it from that perspective, and it felt like almost like a procedural for doing an investigation. It was really enjoyable. It was really, really well done and great performances. I thought that was very, very cool.
Yeah, Mark Ruffalo and Jake Gyllenhaal
and Robert Downey Jr. too. There's the whole Avengers Marvel Universe thing going on there.
So I mean, I don't know what it is, but one of my favorite genres is serial killers. Right? I've not watched Dexter though, but I mean, like those kind of movies, like Son of Sam and the Zodiac Killer. I don't think they ever found him, right?
Well, in this one, they basically follow it from the book that followed. They pretty much know who it is, but he died before they were able to prosecute him.
Right. So I mean, I think it probably goes back to the Jack the Ripper. The story from London, right? Mm-hmm. I would have heard about that when I was quite young, and that's been dragged out in Doctor Who and whatever. I think even Sherlock Holmes and stuff like that run across that one. But for some reason I love those kind of stories. And so when Zodiac came along, I'm just Son of Sam was another good one too. I think it was a movie about
what's that one called? Spike Lee, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It was a really, really good movie. Compelling, right? Just sort of, I don't know, it's just these weird, sort of stories. I don't know what it is about serial killers that I like so much, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, they're utterly, the idea idea that someone is that far sociopathic is really, I think it's a fascination for all of us. Like, how could someone get to that point?
We have a couple of famous Canadian serial killers in real life, right? And I don't know how in the States. Well, we've had the son of Sam and John Wayne Gacy and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, so. Dahmer, Bundy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. There's a fascinating movie that was done ages ago, like easily 20 years ago on HBO. I think it's called Citizen X. And it's about one of the most notorious worldwide serial killers who was operating in communist Russia.
Oh, wow.
And it's about how he used to pick up, kids and tweens and the people who have mental impairments and stuff like that off of trains and take them out to the woods and murder them, rape them and murder them. But it's basically it's sort of a procedural. It's got Donald Sutherland, and it's about how basically inside of a world where they did not want this information getting out there because they considered serial killing a decadent Western thing.
Right.
It's about how they had to like quietly do this investigation and look into this, who it could potentially be. So they're sort of telling two parallel stories, one about the investigation and one about the killer himself and how he's sort of, getting away with all this stuff because of the type of government that was in place and everything else. Very, very interesting story. But this person killed like 50 plus people. Like, it was a very epidemic thing. And it's after Perestroika, when the West or the Eastern Bloc falls, that they finally put two and two together and they start working with the Western serial killer investigators, and they put it together and they find this guy and they catch him in the end. So we actually know who it is and everything else. But it's a very well done movie. I think you can watch it like on demand, and it's been out there for a long time. It's one of those movies. Every time I happen by it on one of the on demand channels or the pay TV channels or whatever, I watch it because it's really, really well done.
Yeah, we had those weird stories. We had the guy that had the pig farmer. Pick up
out in BC, pick up prostitutes.
And then feed them to his pigs, and then they would find all over the farm. And then the recent one was the guy who was picking up men in the gay village in Toronto.
Yes, and that was recent. That was only in the last several years. Last
year or so. Yeah, and
he was a gardener, right? And
you would have like your landscaping done, and he would put dead bodies in the bottom of the pots in your yard, right?
Yeah, that's horrifying.
So just weird stuff. And Killing Eve, of course, is another show that I love.
Well, and of course the Paul Bernardo one is of course one of the most.
Yeah, infamous, it's funny because I don't know. Have you ever seen the American movie that they made with?
No,
I've never managed to do it either. Too. Actually, it's funny. I don't know. He picked up one of the girls in the bus shelter that was across the street from my old high school in St. Catharines.
Oof,
I've been in that bus shelter.
Well, and we know my brother actually knew he was dating a young woman back in that era, and he was going to school down there, and they were friends with one of the victims.
Oh, really? Really?
Oh. So that's pretty close lines. It's scary stuff to think that there but for the grace, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, close to home.
Mm-hmm. Jaime, I thought of you. I finally got to watch the first episode of the new season of Mandalorian on.
Yeah, this would be a great show to talk about Mandalorian on. Let's
find that out, because you guys might not remember, but I said way long ago, I'm like, oh, okay, good. So there's really good timing for me to watch probably the final month of The Mandalorian, which is a couple weeks, I think, in December. I didn't look at the schedule, but let's pretend it finishes like December going into January. I said, oh.
Yeah, it actually doesn't finish till the second week of January.
Okay, yes. So middle of December is probably what I said. I'm like, oh, that's probably a good time to sign up so that I can binge season 1, catch up to season 2, and then start watching on a weekly basis to finish out season 2.
Yep, and you've also got WandaVision is coming, and Mulan, and
Hamilton is there, and I'll be able to watch the then month-old Lego Star Wars holiday special.
That's right.
Basically, just getting as much content as I can for the $7.99, I think it is.
Yeah, but I must admit, the first episode came back, and it was, I thought, amazing. Like, just such a great episode. And I thought to myself, I'm going to send Jaime $8 because I feel like you got to get on board this thing, man, because it's just so
all
good.
All in due time. They're like 30-minute episodes, right? So it won't take me that long to get through, catch up.
It's funny. Like, how long do you figure after the first episode came out last year before you were spoiled on the whole Baby Yoda thing? Like, obviously, that's the cat's out of the bag on that one. I don't know
which episode that was.
End of the first episode is when you first meet the character.
And you actually see the character straight on. There's not like in the shadows or something. Okay, so it must have been that same week then, because the memes started flying. Well, maybe the memes weren't there. Maybe it was the mention of the character, and certainly by the second or third episode, there were tons of memes of stuff going on. So it was hard to miss.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to spoil this episode in any way, but to say good luck avoiding what happened in the first episode until mid-December.
Mid-December might be tough. You know, we've got this election thing going on that has changed all the tension. So I'm not seeing any memes not related to the election in my USA Twitter. Yeah. So I'm doing okay so far. But point taken that it will be harder as we get closer to that mid-December timeframe. Yeah.
No, it was again. I will not in any way spoil it, but to say it really did start the season off with a bang. There was a lot of pew 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 in this one, and it was very, very well done and very well put together, and just chock-a-block with Easter eggs and all kinds of stuff for Star Wars fans. And it's gonna be hard to avoid that. Although you're right, I think the U.S. has got bigger fish to fry than Mandalorian season 2. But it was good. It was really, really, really enjoyable. Cool. So good luck.
This is explicitly my choice, and I suffer the consequences. I'm well aware of this.
I'm telling you, man, we'll take up a collection to all our listeners, all 5 of you. Put in a couple bucks. It's time to pony up for all the free content.
Now's the time to mention our Patreon. You know, but we do have a Patreon page. Any amount that you want helps. You know.
I think Tim and I would be willing to eat this one if we get $8 US in through our Patreon. We'll direct it straight to Jaime so that he can get on board a little sooner.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, I've had CNN on in the background the whole time we've been
any going, updates?
And nothing.
Nothing yet. I told Mark I can't be doing a touchdown dance till it's legit. 2020 is the year of crazy thing happened.
It is the ultimate year of Lucy pulling away the football. Like, it really is. Yeah. No, they have done more updates, and they haven't called anything today at all. But they've been doing updates on when they get vote counts in, and they're like, well, it's down to this. Oh, it's down to that. Oh, it's down to this. And the path looks good. I'm like, yeah, you let me know when you're done.
Right. Anyway, the dog is going to explode, so he's behind me whining and making noises and whatever. So,
all right, well, tune in next week, folks, when we'll hopefully have a president of the United States decided and more Star Trek goodness.
Just to set expectations, by next week we might have we might have this person is currently believed to be president. Now, the court system will take a while. If the year 2000 for you kiddos, go look up what happened in that election year, is any indication, it might be into January, which January 20th is the inauguration for the incoming president. So there's a ticking clock there. So it can't go longer than January as far as I'm aware, but it could very well go into January.
Yeah. Here's hoping not.
Yes, sir.
Yep. All right, guys.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
All right. Talk to you next week.
Okay, bye.